I call this meeting to order. Ellen, can we do a roll call vote?
Mr. Bloom?
Here.
Mrs. Stufen?
Here.
Dr. Harrell?
Here.
Mrs. Bastido?
Here.
Mr. McDonough?
Here.
Mr. Collins is absent, and Mrs. Ebner.
Here. Getting that, okay. 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. The board was in closed session for negotiations, employment of employee, and approval of 4 closed session meeting minutes. Next is Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so this is an exciting time right now in our board meeting. We're going to do recognition, and this is for the York Community High School's Grammy National Gold Signature School Award. So please come on up, Mr. Bill Riddle.
Good evening. I'm Bill Riddle. I'm the Department Chair of Performing Arts and Visual Arts. It's my pleasure to be here this evening, and certainly quite a celebration. I'd like to begin by recognizing first and foremost, actually, the community of Elmhurst. I feel like the community of Elmhurst is plays a large role in this recognition that our district has received, this Grammy recognition. And when I say that, I mean going back historically for decades and decades. The community and as well former and present school boards and administrations, because this is to be able to receive an award like this, and I've said this at several concerts already this spring, but it's a really combined collaborative effort, and it really started decades and decades ago with the kind of support that the arts have received in this community. To be in a place that we're at tonight is not something that happens overnight. It's not something that happens in 1 year. It's something that has been the accumulation of this type of team and collaborative effort over a long period of time. So I did want to start with that, again saying that to me that's what has made this all possible. I want to recognize certainly our current school board and Superintendent Pernod and our current administration for their continued support of the arts program in Elmhurst. I want to also recognize our principal, Diana Smith, for her not only continued support of music and of arts, but her unwavering support of opportunities for students that is such a consistent part of what again allows this to happen. Part of the recognition for this particular award is not only recognizing the high caliber of our performing groups, specifically our orchestra and our band, our symphonic band and our concert choir and our jazz ensemble, our percussion ensemble, our a cappella choir, our jazz choir. It's not only the recognition of the high level of performing groups, but it's a recognition that our program at the high school is a broad-based curriculum, that we have classes for students throughout the school, and those types of classes I'm speaking of are like our guitar classes. We have a beginning guitar class, and next year we'll have a second level of guitar class, piano class, music production classes. This was something that was of particular note to the Grammy Foundation when they were looking at our candidacy for this award, was not only our performing groups and the level that they play at, but also the broad base of our curriculum, even including an after-school program that we have called the Amateur Musicians Club, which involves students from all over the school. I would like to Also, next, recognize our teaching staff throughout District 205. This is a recognition that I strongly believe the high school faculty shares with all, I think it's 26 members of our middle school and elementary school music staff. All of the students they're in the, or almost all of the students that are in the high school program currently were students in the elementary school and middle school music program. So I sincerely feel that this award is, and this celebration is one that we all want to share. What I'd like to do, and I'll be very brief tonight because we want to get to our student speakers, but I would like to have all of our music faculty in District 205, a lot of them are all the way back in the back, but if they could all stand, I'd like to recognize them all, please, from all over across the district. Lastly, we're going to recognize our students, and I say lastly, and most importantly, our students. This is truly about our students, and not only the actual accomplishment, again, of being recognized, but as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, it's really about the idea that they already know, and I think you'll hear in a few minutes when they speak, they already know why music is important. They understand it, they get it, and I think one of the beautiful things about an award like this, attaching the Grammy name to something, is it makes that connection for other people that may not have had the benefit of knowing that. It's, a lot of people have come up to me and to other members of our faculty and congratulated us on this award and said, what a great thing it is to win it, and it is. We're very, very happy about it, but really, it ties a very famous name to a concept that these students already know inside them, and their families, and anyone else who's been able to go through a quality music education program and had music and/or art be part of their lives. It's a wonderful thing to be able to go through the rest of your life and have this experience of being part of something that you're able to express your creativity, establish a community with one another, and to, in a sense, always be able to look at life in a different way than you might have had you not had that type of education. So, I'd like to get right to the students, but for those of you who may not be familiar with the whole process, I'm just going to give you a very, very brief summary of what this was all about. In the early fall, Grammy sends out about 20,000 applications to high schools, public high schools all over the country. We fill out this application giving information about our school music program, a lot of the information I spoke about a minute ago in terms of curriculum, numbers of students that we have involved in that curriculum, performing groups, the type of literature that we do, a lot of demographics about our program. From that, Grammy selects up to this year they selected 129 semifinalists. From that information, we actually were a semifinalist last year as well, and so we were excited to get that information. When you're selected as a semifinalist is the time that you submit all of your CDs with the recordings of your top ensembles, and so we submitted a CD with our orchestra and our symphonic band and concert choir and the groups that I mentioned before. Those CDs are not marked. They're judged anonymously by, they call the Blue Ribbon Panel of music educators and professional musicians. And then they select these and designate a total of 10 signature schools. Actually, we were part of a smaller group called the Gold Signature Schools, one of 3 schools to be named a Gold Signature School. We did receive a $5,500 grant for this as well. And in a nutshell, that was the process. So again, we're humbled and honored as a staff across the district to be recognized in this way. And I wanted to bring up several students to give you just a little bit idea of what music in general has meant to their education. So the first student we'd like to have come up is Will McGing.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Will McGing. When I first came to York, I played the bass, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Almost immediately, I was submersed in the music department through orchestra with Mr. Oswald and through the jazz band. This led to numerous gigs and eventually joining choir and doing a musical. Individually, every faculty member has furthered my playing career and my character in tremendous ways. Not only do they excel at their jobs, but they're also amazing people as well. And the relationships I have made with them are priceless, and there's no amount of tax dollars that could pay for good people like that. Lastly, I will say that the window of opportunity at York, in the York Music Department Lastly, I will say that the window of opportunity that the York Music Department offers is extremely vast. My high school career was filled with uncountable opportunities that only grew as time went on. I will miss the York Music Department, because it has been my home and place of growth for the last 4 years. Although I will miss it, I'm very excited to be attending Berklee College of Music with a scholarship in the fall, and I owe it all to the York Music Department for giving me the gift of music and performance. So I would like to thank you all personally. So thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Emma Fisher. I've been involved in the music department at York for 4 years, playing in the symphonic and marching bands. I've also been on the cross-country and track teams and in some other clubs. But tonight, I just want to say that joining the York Music Department has been one of the best decisions of my life for many reasons. The one that I want to focus on right now is its unyielding pursuit of excellence. Even among other top music departments, what makes our program unique is that it is unpretentious. We're good, but we know we can be better. I'm most familiar with the symphonic band, so I'll use it as an example. Our director, Mr. Pavlik, really gets his fingers in there to use every resource he can. Clinics, guest conductors, famous musicians, you name it. I truly admire Mr. Pavlik for the guts it takes to step off the podium and hand his baton over to world-renowned guest conductors and musicians, knowing that they might change and criticize all of his musical decisions and interpretations right in front of our whole ensemble. Yet he does it routinely. Many people would be too proud to put themselves in that situation, but Mr. Pavlik is not afraid to be wrong. Instead, he's humbly and passionately driven by the desire to be more right, in his own words. This uncommon boldness is characteristic of our entire music department, and it has helped us achieve great heights across the board. As a senior, I'm so sad to leave this vibrant community, but I know it has shaped me as a person, and I will never forget the amazing experiences I've had there. When we remove ourselves from self-imposed limits, we can do amazing things. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Phil Corrado. Throughout my 4 years at York High School, I tried to be as involved as I was possibly capable of. While I competed in both football and track for 3 years, I was also very attached to the music department. For the duration of high school, I was part of the choir. It was until junior year when I finally got my act together, and I made it into the magical group and the musicals. I really wish I did it sooner, but of course I continued it on into my senior year and finished. Next year I will be attending Augustana College, and I am studying advertising. I'm really planning on keeping music in my life. I'm planning on auditioning for the school's choir and their musicals. Before York, I had absolutely no intentions of joining choir. I usually just sang for fun. I never thought of actually pursuing it. Clearly, I'm overjoyed with my decision. Throughout my 4 years, I dreaded basically every single one of my classes, except for one class, and that was concert choir. Every day, our director, Miss Marinetti, she would push us to our fullest ability, and she would challenge us with difficult pieces to sing. Even though it was a lot of hard work, it was just a blast singing with everyone. Also, having I couldn't have dreamed for a more caring and hardworking teacher than Miss M. She's the best. Also, having a phenomenal pianist whose talent and dedication enriches our program, that helped a whole lot to make us sound great for the audience. Also, singing behind the symphony orchestra, it really made it easier to become a better musician and also make us sound better. It's hard to fully describe my experience, but with the help of all these people, I truly became the musician I always dreamed to be. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Mimlitz. At York, I was involved with music and distance running all 4 years. I was able to do choir, madrigals, 2 musicals, be in a music theory class, and be involved with the Amateur Musicians Club. Next year, I'll be attending Belmont in Nashville, and I will continue running and being involved in music any way I can. Attempting to describe York's music department. Let me try again. Attempting to describe what York's music department means to me is daunting. However, I believe I've found a way. This spring, I was in York's musical Tarzan. Not only does the family theme of the show describe the music department perfectly, but the idea of 2 worlds coming together means more to me. Before I became involved in music at York, I was just a runner. But thanks to the amazing people within the music department, I have been able to bring both of my worlds together. While this happens at other schools, the experience I've been able to have at York cannot be matched. It has been a privilege for me to be involved in a music department that is just as quality as 28 state championships. For that, I'll be forever thankful. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Altergott, and during high school I was involved in the music department in the band, marching band, and jazz band for all 4 years, and I absolutely loved it, every minute. I also was in 3 sports and a couple of clubs at York, but one thing that really stood out to me was how much fun I had in music. Next year, I'll be majoring in biomedical engineering at the University of Washington in sunny Seattle, and but I fully intend on keeping with music. I actually just got my marching band audition material a few days ago, so I'm looking forward to that. As for York's music department, I think everyone can agree that music brings people together naturally. But what's special about York is how that collaboration has snowballed over the past 4 years and into a thriving small ensemble program. To me, the music department has become an opportunity to give back to this community and also to grow as an individual. I was fortunate to play with a small group this year around Elmhurst, at the hospital, and at the retired folks home, and I can promise there's nothing more rewarding than bringing happiness to another person. The music directors at York have laid a wonderful foundation for musical ability, but they've also taught me that playing my instrument, it's only the first step. By placing the focus not on simply playing, but on playing to benefit others, Mr. Pavlik and Mr. Riddle have inspired all of us to become better musicians and also to become better people. Thank you.
We have one student who could not be here today, so at the last minute I got this email, and I think that I can read it. It's very small. This is from a student named Carlo Paldine, who took intermediate guitar freshman year, beginning music production junior year, and advanced music production senior year. He will be attending the University of Wisconsin-Madison, studying business, but fully intends to keep producing and making music for as long as he can. He states, "My experience with the York Music Program was unique because I wasn't part of a performing group, such as a choir, band, or orchestra. However, because of the supportive and involved faculty and the dynamic design of the curriculum for the music production classes, I feel that my experience was just as fulfilling and wonderful as other students in different parts of the music program. It allowed me to explore my creativity in ways I couldn't do in any of my other classes throughout high school, and because of that, I've grown not only as a musician, but as a person." So that's from Carlo Paldine. And I also just wanted to say one quick thing. The one thing that I wanted to mention at the end of this is that anybody who knows Bill Riddle knows that he will not talk about how wonderful he is or what he does for the department. He works so hard, and I just wanted to say that because of his holistic approach to music education, the faculty at York has been given constant support and encouragement to think outside the box, expand our offerings to students, and broaden the education of all involved. As Chris Gemko, a music teacher in our department, told me today, "I have never felt such support in teaching as I do from Bill and from the music department as a whole. I have no doubt that I'm a better teacher to our students because creativity and change is not only encouraged, but expected." So I would like to, like Bill, thank the community, but also really give some credit to Bill Riddle for organizing all of this, the application process and the painstaking CDs and all that it took, but just being a wonderful leader and teacher and friend. So,
Okay. So I'm going to read a proclamation, but I just wanted to say one thing. I was able to attend 4th and 5th grade orchestra and band concerts this year, and then I attended the York Symphony Orchestra concert last week, and it's just amazing to me the growth of our students from 4th to through high school. So it's the entire music education program is working in tandem, and it was very impressive. Okay. Whereas the Grammy Foundation program recognizes the top U.S. public high schools that are making an outstanding commitment to music education during an academic school year by selecting 125 schools as Grammy semifinalists from an initial pool of 20,000, and 10 schools nationwide as Grammy signature schools, with the top 3 schools designated as gold recipients. And whereas the York Community High School Music Program, under the direction of Performing Arts Division Chair Bill Riddle, has been named one of the 3 gold signature schools across the nation and was recognized for this achievement on May 16, 2013, at the York Symphony Orchestra concert by Matt Hennessy, president of the Chicago chapter of the Recording Academy, on behalf of the Grammy Foundation, and was presented with a custom award and a grant of $5,500 to benefit its music program. And whereas President and CEO of the Recording Academy and the Grammy Foundation, Neil Portnow, noted, "For the past 15 years, our Grammy Signature Schools program has been providing much-needed financial resources and recognizing excellence in schools across the United States whose music programs have a positive impact on the lives of their students. And whereas the ongoing commitment of our K through 12 music staff, students, parents, the District 205 community enjoys a vital music program with student participation numbering over 2,000 students, or approximately 25%. And whereas this accomplishment brings pride and prestige to York Community High School, to District 205, and the community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 express congratulations to these students, their parents, and their teachers for this outstanding accomplishment. Thank you. Okay, now we come to public comments. Are there any more public comments? Okay, Malia's say we can take a short break if anybody would like to leave before we do public comments and move on to the next part of the meeting. Okay, it's okay. Okay, we're going to start with public comments. Oh, okay. So we have quite a few public comments, and in the interest of fairness, the individuals requesting to address the board, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and it's not the practice of the board to respond at this time, but issues can be referred to our superintendent for investigation. So the first one is Anita Pastel. And could you just, when you come up to the microphone, just state your name and address? Thanks.
My name is Anita Pastava. I live at 704 North Van Auken. The reason I'm here today is in regards to the concerns I have at the changes for Conrad Fisher with the bilingual dual language program. Myself and many other parents feel we are not being communicated what is going on with the changes. We have 4 qualified teachers that have been there for many years leaving to make way for bilingual teachers that are clearly not going to be at the caliber of the teachers that we are losing. In addition to this year, I've been at Fisher for 12 years. This is the first year the segregation in our classrooms is so transparent, with the name calling, with the fighting, with many instances in the school this year. And it's all, as I feel and many of the other parents feel, it's due to segregating the kids with the name calling. And we are very concerned about our kids, our school, our teachers, our community, and we need to be a part of what is going on. Is this a top-down approach? You guys coming in saying this is the changes? Are you listening to Mrs. Bailey and the teachers? Do they have a say in what's going on? Do our parents have a say in what's going on with the kids? There are other nationalities moving into the community. Are they going to have equal resources? Example, Polish. Are there going to be ELL classes and resources available for them if needed. These are all legitimate concerns that I have and many other parents and teachers have. And we would like to know something. We don't want it to come into the beginning of the year and this is the changes and we weren't a part of any of it. Because we're hearing stuff that is coming out that we're not even told. It's just become the telephone effect. No one knows and you're getting pieces. This teacher's leaving, that teacher's leaving, and it's unfair for us. These affect our kids, our community, our school, and our teachers. And you know, many of the teachers today, it was a happy day for the kids last day, but it was a very sad day. You come to the school and those are our teachers, and now they're gone to some place else. You know, and if you guys come to the school, you visit the school. You maybe come once a month or once every couple of weeks. You don't really know what is going on in that school, and I hope you take Mrs. Bailey and the teachers' input seriously because they know the school. They are there every day. They work with the kids. They work with the teachers and the parents. So with that, I hope you really can address those concerns that we have and let the community and the teachers and the parents know what is going on because we don't know anything. It's all hearsay, the telephone effect, and that's unfair to us because those are our kids. And when we go to Churchville, what is the, you know, you say you want to bridge the gap of the classes and the school. How is that going to happen with the segregating the kids and Conrad Fisher being the only school at a different academic level? That's unfair. Thank you.
Okay, next is Jerome Coate. It's hard to read.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Cody. I live at 775 Emroy. I go to my kids go to Fisher School. I'm not sure if you're going to want to listen to this room because we all pretty much have the same thing to say. The communication issues is probably the biggest thing. Let's dispel the rumors, get it out in the open, and tell us what the heck is going on. That's what we need to know. I got to tell you, I moved into Elmhurst. I went to the Fisher schools. The first thing I did was looked at the scores on the Fisher schools. And when I seen how poor they were, I was disgusted. I was like, what did we do? Where did we move? We thought Elmhurst had good schools. They were terrible scores. But you know what? We went to school there and we seen the melting pot there. All the benefits we had from bringing all those multicultures together and what our children learned from that. And it's gone. You've segregated them. My son was threatened by a gangbanger. How is that protecting his safety? I'm disgusted. You're giving teachers away that have been there for many years. Today, students, teachers, everybody was crying. Have any of you live in our neighborhood? Any of you? Have any of you visited our schools to see what's going on there? Are you listening to the teachers? Are you listening to Mrs. Bailey? It's your job to protect our schools and protect our students. And I don't see it getting done. And I'm sorry, but as Anita said, we only know what's rumors. So if I'm going off on you, I'm sorry. But that's what I'm going off on you on. There's racial tensions. My son was threatened by a gangbanger. How is this in the interest of our students' education and being fair? What is your ultimate goal here? The bottom line of the district? The money that you get from the state to run this program, where's that money going? Is it going into Fisher or is it going to go to the other schools? And what proof do we have that it's going into Fisher? You're going to do this to Fisher, then we should be the beneficiaries of it. Bensonville just built a nice new school. How about we redraw the boundaries and we keep Bensonville students in Bensonville and Elmhurst students in Elmhurst? Stop trading our students for dollar signs. I think I probably can say this pretty well. Many of us feel like you're ripping our school out from underneath us. Not only that, but many of us are invested in this culture, this neighborhood, and our house values might go down because of it. And you guys are making this decision for us. We have no say in it. As the music people said, put some faces on your decisions. Start thinking about what you're deciding, put a face to it, and think about what you're doing. I hope your decisions are appropriate and without conscience so that you can sleep at night. Fisher has always been an island, and it's continuing to be an island, and you're going to make it even more so. Please correct me if I'm wrong, and I hope I am wrong. Thank you.
Okay, next is Michelle Doherty.
Okay, so I hate talking in front of people. I'm doing this right now for my little girl who is a first grader at Conrad Fisher. And I have had 2 other students go to Conrad Fisher who are in the REACH program, who are very smart, and it's because of the teachers. I know that for a fact. And this year, we've lost so many good teachers that, well, as an example is when people talk negatively about Conrad Fisher, I always said, yes, but the teachers are amazing. I know my kids are getting the same education as your kids are getting in the South Side or wherever. And now when you're taking all these teachers away, I'm not going to lie to you, maybe now I feel like, well, maybe everybody was right. Maybe the North Side is worse than the South Side or whatever. And I'm thinking of my first grader who isn't in the REACH program and will never be in the REACH program. She struggles. She was in a class this year with 29 students with an amazing teacher. I never worried about her. One time, I never worried about her because I knew she was going to be fine. But you're taking all these teachers away. And my guess is, as I'm a teacher as well, that the ones you're hiring that are speaking Spanish, which is wonderful, are probably young, new teachers, which is fine. I know that's good, but you're taking away experienced teachers from my student who needs the help, and I'm worried about her. She struggles. She has a hearing problem. Is she going to be in a class with 30 kids every year? Is she going to be left behind because she's right on the line of average because there's all these other problems going on in a classroom of 30 students? This is my fear. I hate doing this. I hate confronting. I hate ruffling feathers. I'm standing here because of my first grader. I want you to think about that. Really, when you're taking experienced teachers away from my kids to send them to schools that are already doing well. I don't understand. I understand that we need to help our major, what am I trying to say, the English as a second language students. I get that, but at what cost? My kid? I want you to think about that. And think about the teachers that have been at Fisher for so long and have taught my children. Thank you.
Okay, next person is Alice Rudenga.
Hi, I'm Alice Rodenga. I live at 15W571 Victory. I have 2 students who are now at York, but who are alumni of Conrad Fisher, and that is my neighborhood school. As many parents have spoken, I am also an ESL teacher myself. I understand that the classroom, because these teachers are leaving, the teachers that are going to come in will have to be bilingual teachers. And so at Conrad, I understand there's about 150 students who are listed as Spanish at home. At least 20 of those don't even speak Spanish at home. Illinois is one of 3 states that still have an antiquated system for bilingual programs. It is, first off, it's also difficult to find quality bilingual teachers. I can speak Spanish, but I'm never going to roll my R's like a native Spanish speaker, and there are many Spanish speakers who will never have the same finesse that the English language has. They will not understand the idioms, and some of my counterparts where I teach have those same problems. The program right now at Conrad Fisher, how it is a developmental bilingual program, and what happens is your kid comes into the school and you check that little box, is there another language spoken at home? It could just be a parent who marks that box because grandma comes in the summer that speaks Spanish, and yet the mom speaks fluent English and the kid's speaking fluent English, and they take a test, and believe me, if any of our kids took this test, it is a difficult test. It's a listening test, and I might read a paragraph, and then I'm going to ask them what was in sentence 2, and if the kid has even the slightest bit of ADD, they're not going to be able to remember, and I'm going to mark them off, and they're going to go down that track into the bilingual program. And the problem with it, and again, Illinois is one of only 3 states, and that's why I know everybody's concerned with being in non-compliance. Many, many schools and districts in the state of Illinois are in non-compliance because the program is so antiquated in Illinois. What's happening, the longer the students are in a special language program, they fall behind their counterparts. The graduation rates are usually less than 60%. Latinos have an overall highest dropout rates than their peers in any of the states. English learners, it's the students, and then again, students with the lowest skill levels will end up 5 to 7 years to become proficient in English, and many of them will be stuck in the program for their entire career. Because again, taking an access test and exiting out is a difficult test. Another thing that I'm not sure about in our district is after a student has passed the access test, the fact that they're eligible for 3 years of a language program, once they pass the test, there is no reason that those students are still in that program. Now you're holding them back. And when you look at, when my kids went to Conrad Fisher with Sammy Hero, and my kids were in that community where there was a mixture of kids. There was no racial tension when my kids went there, and I've got a sophomore and a senior. But now what I'm hearing from the parents is now these kids are segregated, so now they go only to lunch and recess and maybe a special with them, so they're not even having the opportunity to acquire more English when that kid yells to them at the playground, oh hey, pass the ball, or can I have a red crayon? They're not hearing that daily English language, and they're missing opportunities because of the segregation that's going on, because of the school district being concerned about being in compliance with a state that has an antiquated system, and that's why so many districts in the state of Illinois are in non-compliance.
Okay, next is Jennifer DeBashir.
Hi, everybody. Go Hawks. My name is Jennifer DeBocher, and I live at 3 North, 300 Emroy. And like the other Fisher parents, I have a 17-year-old who is now a senior at York, and then I have a daughter who is basically now a 8th grader at Churchville. And they've done well. And again, I have to applaud the teachers and Mrs. Bailey and all the staff members because they always showed them character. They taught them well. We didn't have a big problem with bullying in there because kids just understood each other. They were colorblind. If somebody wore mismatching shoes and hats, it didn't matter because a lot of the kids did it, and the kids accepted it. So not only did they learn math and reading and whatnot, they learned to have a higher social intelligence, I believe, and that's what I've seen. Now I question it like everybody else. I don't have anybody at Conrad Fisher now, but I do have a 3-year-old, and I want her to have the same experiences as my other 2 did. But I can't help but being suspicious when I hear things that aren't, again, that are rumors, that 4 teachers are going, now 2 teachers are going. What's going to happen now with the social worker's caseload? Because, by the way, I'm a social worker too. Okay, he's going to another school, but what's going to happen to his caseload? That is either Hispanic or Polish or English. Okay, at what cost is he leaving? At what cost are the 4 teachers leaving? That's what we're worried about. It's not about just about the language. We have the poverty issues. I'm 100% Polish. I'm very proud to be Polish, but if I want my kids to learn in Polish, I would take them to a Polish school. I want them to learn in English. And if you talk to a lot of Spanish-speaking parents at Conrad Fisher, they want their kids to learn in English. English is how you get ahead. English is what they're being taught at Jefferson and Emerson and all the other schools where my kids will eventually meet, or my little one will eventually meet them at York. Okay, how can that best be done if she's going to be learning Spanish part of the time, or if she's learning 80-20 or 90-10 or whatever? I don't even really know what that means, and that's part of the problem. There's a lot of dialogue that's going on, and we don't know what is really truly going on. We do know that 4 teachers, very great teachers, were let go, and not let go, were transferred to another school to make way for 4 bilingual teachers for state compliance reasons. So you guys are up to a very difficult task as far as we're concerned. We want you to please consider all of the kids that go to Fisher, not just the kids that are bilingual, because of course they're important too. But again, segregating them isn't helping the matter at all. It's just creating further tension, and we're creating further gaps now even in between Fisher. We used to have a gap with Fisher and the other schools. And again, most of us that know Fisher, we just turned the other cheek about that because we knew the truth. We knew the value that was in Fisher. We knew the Fisher parents that even if they didn't speak English with us, they loved their kids just as we did. So we would smile and we would get along. Nobody ever thought less of each other. Nobody judged each other. But I hear that's not the case anymore, and that concerns me greatly. And again, this is Elmhurst, and we have great schools and great people, so I'd just like to continue to have it that way. So thank you.
Okay, next public comment, Servando Cedillo.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Servando Cedillo. I live at 840 North Eastland Street. A lot of what I'm going to say today is based on what we're all talking about. Is a lot of hearsay. So if there's certain things that I say that are not accurate, I do apologize for that. But I'm going to give you a little story of my background as well, and hopefully that can help you understand what some of the kids are going through as well. I live in Elmhurst for about 3 years now. I had an opportunity of buying a house 3 years ago. I could have lived in Bensonville. I could have lived in Addison, but I didn't. I bought a house in Elmhurst, especially because of the academic scores, the schools. I have 3 daughters. One's going to 2nd, another one's going to 5th and 8th grade. They love the school. Their teachers are awesome. They push the kids every day. One teacher, Mrs. Barley, put my daughter into the Enrich program, so I thank her for that. So we have a lot of great, talented teachers that we are losing. Let's see. Okay, why are we as Elmhurst tax-paying residents not being informed of the changes that the school district is making in our community? Okay, why are we losing great quality teachers who care for our children and earned a lot of respect from the parents? Why are they being moved to the better schools within our community and being replaced by new teachers with maybe little to no experience? Okay? I feel that this is being kept a secret, and then it's too late for us to find out, and it's too late for us to make any changes or reverse the changes that the district is making upon our children in our community. Okay, I'm an American from Hispanic parents. I came here when I was 1 year old. It's a little tough for me, but hold on. My parents didn't speak English. Okay, so I didn't have a lot of support at home, but I made it through school. I was in Irish class in junior high school, in high school, went into the military, have a bachelor's degree, have a great career, have a beautiful house here in Elmhurst with 3 beautiful daughters and a wife. I'm living the American dream. A lot of these kids are going through that as well. I think by you segregating them is going to further their career or their advancement in school. Okay. So this is how a lot of Americans make it through life, right? So what about people that come from Germany, Poland, Ireland, Africa, China, Japan? What are we doing for those students? Are we going to create a special program for them as well? And if not, why not? How are they going to make it through the system? All right? How are we going to compare those to the kids that are going to be in this new system? Okay. I believe today there's about 480 students versus 2 years ago, which is 400 students. So in 2 years' time, there's been an increase of 80 students, roughly, and typically within kindergarten and second grade. We need to understand why that is. Why do we have such a big increase? How come when the bus drops off the kids in the apartment buildings, a lot of the parents pick them up in a car and drive away? Why is that? I think if we really understand the root cause, we wouldn't be going through these changes. And these changes are expenses that are coming out of taxpayers' money, where I'd rather have that money go to better enhance our children's careers and so forth. So my concerns are property values will decrease. A lot of new home construction that's going on today in our community, in our area, is going to be reduced because of that, because a lot of new parents are not going to want to come into our community. They want to go into the south side versus the north side. Okay. Not only that, but I personally believe we're going to attract a lot more non-English-speaking families coming into our community and using the false addresses. And I don't think we're doing a good job of ensuring that those families really live in our community. Okay. So there's a lot of concerns. I want you guys to be honest with the community. I want the parents to have a voice in what's going on and be part of it. So we're working together so that our kids have a better life. I want our kids to have more creativity, more initiative. I want more leadership programs as well. I think we're lacking of that. And that's going to further their career and make them be leaders in our community and in the world, right? So please let us be part of the decision-making process. And one thing is, why is this being kept a secret? You know, why are teachers not being allowed to speak about this as well? It seems like the district is telling the teachers, you cannot say nothing of what's going on. A lot of this is hearsay. I'm very surprised because I think Elmhurst community board members and parents and so forth have a high standard. So it's I almost feel like we're being disrespected. You know, we're taxpayers. We pay your salaries. We work together. You don't work for us. We work together. I want to continue that relationship. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker is Mike Burfiend.
Good evening. Thank you for listening to me tonight. My name is Mike Burfiend. I live at 703 South Washington. I grew up in Elmhurst, went to Edison, Sandburg, and York. And after a stint in the city back in 2010, my wife and I moved into our house in Washington, which was our dream home. So we moved in January, and then 4 months later, there was a storm event that left our finished basement with 1.5 feet of water in it. So we cleaned that out, took out all the carpeting, redid the basement. A month later, a month to the day that it flooded the first time, we took 8.5 feet of water in then. Had to evacuate my 4-month-old daughter on a boat from the fire department, and I spent the last 3 years implementing projects worth of tens of thousands of dollars to mitigate flooding in my home. This last April, I took on 5 feet of water. So we're now at the mercy of the city to help with the flooding issue. And I know they've gone through a study, they put a plan together, they put it in front of the board today. It's taken them a while to get here, but I just ask that you look and consider the plan and understand the details of that plan. Know that the plan is additive. So if there's a certain part of the plan that is rejected, there will be homes in Elmhurst that flood indefinitely. So if the school board refuses to let flooding, use their land to let flooding be retained there for some time, my home will flood indefinitely. I appreciate you considering the plan in front of you, expediting the decision on the plan, and moving forward as quickly as possible. Thanks for your consideration.
Joe Jones.
Hi, my name is Joe Jones, 686 North Kenilworth. I'm here tonight
because I'm upset with the lack of communication about the changes at Conrad Fisher. I have 3 students currently at Conrad Fisher, and with the lack of communication and the rumors that are going on with the changes that we have seen and changes that we haven't seen yet at the school, forced my family to make some tough decisions in terms of where my kids will be going to school for the years to come. Sometimes I feel like I'm abandoning the parents and the school and the other students there. But my wife and myself have felt that we need to make the change to take my kids out of the public schools and put them into private school now, just because of the lack of communication, lack of information. We don't know what to expect for next year with my students and my kids. We've asked the teachers, we've asked Mrs. Bailey, and nobody can give us an answer because they don't know either, because they're not given the information. So please share this information with the students, with the parents, with the community, so we know what's going on, so we can make informed, better decisions on the future of our kids and the students in our community. Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 more. Tatiana. Can't read the last name. Okay, thank you.
My name is Tatiana Reppelin. I'm at 322 South Kingery Court, actually in Addison, Illinois. My children go to Conrad Fisher as well. I am the sister of 2 teachers in the Elmhurst district, one at Emerson and actually one at Fisher. I myself attended Conrad Fisher, grew up down the street off of Wilson, so long life community member. Last year, when we got the notices about the changes that were going to be made at our school, it was an email, and the email said that there were going to now be these ESL or ELL classrooms, and in first grade, my first grader would be in the only gen ed classroom at Conrad Fisher. So as you can imagine, getting that via email, my heart dropped. I am Latina. We grew up with Spanish in the home. My son is a 4th grader. He would have checked the box when he was getting into kindergarten that he spoke Spanish at home because his dad did. I spoke to them in English, and he did have trouble with reading. He was so fortunate in first grade, in second grade, with the quality of the teachers he had, with the interventions, the early interventions that were done in his reading, and he now is reading at average. Now, my daughter, frankly, she's very fortunate. She doesn't have the challenges, but he would have been one of those students that did not need to go into an ESL classroom, but would have inadvertently ended up there because there would have been concerns that there was Spanish in the classroom. The reason my heart dropped, not only because of the quality of the education, but I also know what segregation can do to the culture of a school and what it can do to the personal images and self-esteems of the children in those classrooms. It is very easy to see now, oh, well, that's the brown classroom. What happens when you're in the brown classroom? Is that because you are not as smart? Or is it, why? For the first time, and my kid has been at Conrad Fisher since kindergarten, for the first time, people have been asking him what his nationality is because he's in the gen ed classroom. Should he be in the gen ed classroom? Should he maybe be in the ESL? I don't think so. And the point is that these changes were heavy-handed and a dramatic departure from where the school was, in a school that was achieving and showing progress, year-to-year growth from a score perspective. I know we have to deal with demographic issues. I understand it. I also understand compliance. I lead a human resource function. We have compliance issues from a labor standpoint that we have to deal with every day. There are choices in how you comply. The way that we've chosen to comply was heavy-handed and unnecessary and has completely changed the school. And frankly, like Mr. Jones, I'm considering taking my children out of a school that I moved to Elmhurst and then decided I wanted a bigger house, and the taxes were a little cheaper, frankly, in Addison, so I went to Addison. But I chose that school because of the diversity and the wonderful experiences that I had growing up here. And I'm sad to say that I don't know what I'm going to do. But I'm scared for my daughter, similar to another parent that spoke there in first grade. Sergio will be fine because he's a 4th grader, is going into 5th. His career is almost ending, thankfully. That's how I feel, thankfully, at Conrad Fisher because of the change. I didn't feel that last year. It's this school year that has changed things dramatically. This one year, and this is the fear I had. And I spoke to Ms. Military about it. I spoke to folks at the board about it. This was the fear that I had. I sent emails about what was going to happen in this school. And I got no response, really, other than, well, we have to comply. I wanted to be part of the ESL advisory board. Initially, Karen Military told me that I was not qualified because I did not have kids who were in ESL services. To me, those programs absolutely impact my children because it impacts the entire school. And so, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know what's happening next year, but I do tell you that something has to change. And the morale around the teachers. I mean, I have a sister who's a teacher. I understand the beautiful culture that school had from a morale standpoint, and it's not going to be the same, and it's a lot different this year. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
And the last comment card I have is Jeff Bird.
Hi, my name is Jeff Bird. I live on 707 South Washington Street, right next to Mike Burfing, who's already elegantly spoke. My wife and I moved to Elmhurst 5 years ago, and one of the reasons we moved here is because of the great education. And as I sat back and listened about the music program, I thought about, how many communities don't even have a music program in their high school and in their middle schools and in their elementary school. I have a child that is 7. He's going into 2nd grade, and I have 2 more that soon will be going into elementary school, and I'd like them to remain in Elmhurst. But I have to be honest with you, I got about a foot of water on June 22nd, 2010. I got 9 feet of water on July 22nd, 2010, and I just got another 2 foot of water here recently. I've done everything I can to protect my home. I'm doing more. I'm spending thousands of dollars. The city has a plan. They're a little late in coming with the plan, but they have a plan. They're going to put it in front of you. I hope that you take a look at it. Understand that we are at a crossroads. We're either going to try to fix the problem, and we're going to fix it with your help, or you're going to have people like Mike and myself that choose to live elsewhere and take our tax dollars with us. So take that into consideration. Our tax base is going down because our property values are going down. We're going to stick it out as long as we can. We love the community. The Conrad Fisher people, I love the fact that you guys have come together. That's what community is all about. We have a great block at Washington. I wouldn't change it for the world. I love the people that live next to me, but I need to make decisions for the betterment of my family. And if this plan does not take effect very quickly, then I will move elsewhere. So I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move up item number 13 in the agenda, action on closed session item. This is employment of employee, and we have our employee right here, so we're going to do this right now. So it's number 13, action on closed session item. Do I have a motion?
Sure. I would like to move that the Board of Education approve the appointment of Ms. Gina Pogue Reeder as the principal at Churchville Middle School, effective July 1st, 2013.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Chris, seconded by John McDonough. Can we do a roll call vote?
Mr. Bloom?
I'm sorry. Is there any discussion? Okay.
I would just ask Gina to stand up before the vote. Gina is our recommendation to the board, and the board's acting this evening as the next Churchville principal.
Is there anything else? We do a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bloom,
Yes.
Mr. McDonough,
Yes.
Dr. Harrell,
Yes.
Mrs. Bastido,
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen,
Yes.
Mr. Collins is absent, Mrs. Ebner.
Yes. That's 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. That motion passes. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Okay, so we'll go back to where we were, number 7, superintendent's communication.
Yes, the first item is a Freedom of Information Act request. The district has received 2 of these since the past month. One request was a list of current full-time employees, which was granted, and one requested information regarding scheduled work at schools during the summer. That was also granted. The second item is related to the city flood plan. And so what I'd like to do is, David, if you could pull up the maps. It doesn't matter, just whatever one you want to pull up. Just as background for the Board of Education, about 6 months ago, we had a meeting with the city manager and city officials to talk about a possible plan for flood zones within district property as a response to the flooding issues that have plagued Elmhurst for a vast number of years. We initially took the information from the city. We had some questions, had another meeting just about 3 weeks ago, and they presented this plan to us. A couple of things. They have reduced the number of areas that they wanted to use as flood containment within the school district itself, but they are requesting that 3 areas be considered as flood areas for us. So what I thought we would do tonight is walk through the 3 areas, and what I'd like the board to do is generate any questions that you have. And then the next step would be to bring the city in and have them respond to the questions that the city have about the flood storage area that they are proposing on our property within the school zones, and then have an ongoing dialogue with the city about those flood areas. So tonight's intent is not necessarily to discuss the pros and cons of the program. It's to generate questions that board members may have on behalf of the school district that we may have and need clarification from the city on. There were a number of questions that the administration have that are included in your packet, but I think the board may have some other questions. So let me start with the first one. The first one is Bryan Middle School. If you know Bryan, we have a varsity softball field that you see on the map in the bottom portion of the area that the city is proposing for flood storage. That is the one in the front. The second softball field sits in the back, and that is not the varsity girls softball field, but it is a softball field that's used at Bryan. As you see, the proposal from the city is to make that whole area, which is on the west side of the building, a flood storage area. And as you can see by the diagram on the upper right-hand corner, they would dig out approximately 9 feet and have a slope going down in that area about 9 feet. And the idea is that they would put a drainage system underneath the field that would allow for drainage, but during heavy rain, as we've experienced in the last couple of years, that area would be allowed to flood with the idea that it would run off as quickly as possible. Our major concern at first was, could we fit the varsity regulation softball field within that area? They came up with this proposal. They changed the original drawing a little bit, and it appears that it does fit. However, there is a slope on the left field side that still is questionable, that we'd want further questions about whether or not that's on the uphill slope or not. But as you can see, it appears that the varsity softball field would fit into that area. But again, to give you an idea, and you can see by the lower right-hand corner, this area would be dug out. The base would be down from the level 9 feet, and then floodwaters would run into this retention area, again, would be flooded during heavy storms, and then would drain and come forward. So that's the concept that the city is proposing for all three of these sites. There's a little variation between the three sites, but basically that is the concept. Again, they would put in turf, they would put in gravel, they would put in sand, and then a pipe drainage system to drain off. If you go to the next one, David. This is Jackson. If you look at Jackson, right now Jackson has a play field that is just to the north of the school. The play field is sometimes used for soccer, but it is the main green space as the playground for Jackson on the Jackson site. This site, as you can see by the upper right-hand corner, does not have as deep a dig out as the other locations. This is only about 3 feet going down in that area, and you can see the conceptual pictures. Then they're on the right. Again, though, this is our main playground area at the Jackson, on the Jackson site. So again, same concept. This area would flood during heavy storms and then would drain out, and the retention would be in this area. And then finally, the last one is Madison. Madison, there is a field to the south of Madison that we basically do not use a whole lot. Madison usually has their children on the playground on the main part of the building. This area is used mostly by the community. Again, same concept. You can see at the cross section, this is also a deeper cut into that area, and with a slope. For every foot of down, it's a 4-foot area of slope, so you get the idea of how steep that slope is. There's also retaining walls around this area, and again, for this one, we do not presently use it. One of the questions, however, that is long-term, and I think the board needs to consider and probably ask the city, if we were going to expand the schools and every one of these sites, what would the consequence be of providing a flood storage area for those areas? There's no plans presently to expand the schools, but into the future, if enrollment increases, if the Early Childhood Center continues to get more and more students, is this an area we would be considering for expansion at the Madison site? So another one of those questions that you may want to consider with the board. So at this point, I don't know if the board has questions for us that we'll try to answer. Again, there's probably questions that you want to generate for the city. 'Cause this is, and again, I'll emphasize the city, this is concept right now. They have not finalized any kind of plans pending more discussion with the Board of Education and the Park District. That's going on simultaneously. As a matter of fact, unfortunately, there's a meeting tonight that conflicted with our board meeting tonight, so we could not be in attendance. So at that point, I'll open up for questions. Chris Welton was also at the meeting, and Frank Shue. Is Frank still here? Yeah. Frank, if you would come up just in case the board has questions. Frank was also in on the initial discussions with the city on these conceptual drawings. So, and with that, open it up to board members.
Okay, so as Dave said, I think that's a really good idea to generate a list of questions, because reading this material generates a large list of questions just for me alone. So if you, Ellen, I guess we'll just verbatim list these questions out for us. Okay. So if anyone wants to go first, and I can go last. We can go down the line. Karen?
Okay. So really overall, I think that we need to look at, guarantees around usability, safety for our students, and, I think we have to say, it can't be a cost to us in education, right, to do these things. So the questions would be, what are the drainage timeframes? So that's usability. And safety of our students, as well as the time frame for usability. What's our exposure for liability when these areas flood? Because it is our property. I'm assuming that the fencing and the retaining walls and all those sorts of things are maybe protection for that. but I can't assume. It's not necessarily a question, but just a concern that we need to wrap around. I don't have a specific question around vetting of all the options. I know that the city has 4 different options. I'm not sure that we saw all 4 of the options. So it's looking at the pros and cons and evaluating the options. What's best? What's in our best interest? Meaning the community, the students, education, those sorts of things. To Mr. Pruneau's point about if we've got increased enrollment, which we're seeing, will we have to build out Madison as an example? So a question would be, how is the community and the school community, like the community members around Elmhurst as well as those areas, how are those issues going to be resolved? So how are they really making sure that they're vetting all of the questions? I know that we have some of the residents here because we need to do that, okay? So what's that process? 2 last questions. Will these plans truly protect the homes in the neighborhoods? So that's part of the process of looking at the pros and cons of all the options. But that's the key question. And I know that there's another school district, there's probably others, but one that was mentioned was Downers Grove. What's the response from that school district? How it's working? Can we learn from them? What's the usability?
That's a park, so it's not a school.
Okay.
The example that
that
Mayor
we got.
Morley gives,
Okay.
it's a park in Downers Grove.
Okay.
So it's not a school.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification.
It's a little hard to get into what our question should be when we're forming these questions based on a single drawing and not having a discussion about what the improvements would be and how they interact and so forth. I've tried to go through some of the reports, but I pretty much divvied up my questions that I've written so far into 3 categories. Number 1 is, how will this affect our kids? And that's who we hold the land for, is for the benefit of our kids. And so questions that flow from that is, for example, 9 feet. Do we have an example of 9 feet that we can look at and know that it works, a 9-foot grade difference? You raise a real good question, Dave, about future school expansion, which begs the question for me is, can we provide, should we come to this agreement to provide some sort of use to the city to use for stormwater detention? Can we put it for a certain time limit that it can be changed to reflect our changing needs? Capital program for the land that we have. The reason why these are here is because the open spaces in Elmhurst are basically taken. And so I think we need to look at this from the perspective of our future needs. And so that was an excellent suggestion. As far as how this will affect the use of the field, I understand there is this example of the dry bottom park in Downers Grove being shown as an example of how it can work. And I'm just knowing a little bit about civil engineering projects, and not much, but just enough. I know that it really is a function of how often the area is flooded, the frequency of events. So will these handle 20-year floods, 5-year floods, 2-year floods? So how often will these things be inundated? The duration of the inundation. How long will it take so many inches of rain to go away? And then what will that do to the use of the facility? If we have a spring like this, will our softball team be unable to use that field for a month, month and a half? These are questions we want to know. And so I think it's a real fact-specific thing that needs to look closely. And so I think we need to ask these questions with the goal of getting some of this technical information known so that we can cooperate on this. again, will I'm assuming all the cost of maintenance will be absorbed by the city, which is the governmental body that handles stormwater and has revenue sources available to it to handle the additional maintenance. But I'd like to know from the city that the maintenance caused by the inundation of these areas will be something that they will absorb. And then another question is there's a whole bunch of coordinated things in the stormwater plan that can, if done properly, reduce the impacts of the inundation of these areas on our use of the fields. Could possibly reduce the frequency, reduce the duration of the inundation, reduce the amount of restoration needed to restore use. And so one of my questions would be is how quickly can these other items be implemented? There's a statement there that they want to remove reverse driveways, which, that to me looked like the hardest thing of all. People have built their houses in such a way to have driveways leading down to a subgrade garage, and, removing them, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I'd like to know what that is. There are code changes regarding elevation changes of foundations, and reduction of impervious surfaces, which would basically turn lots into self-detention facilities where you store a certain amount of the stormwater that is going now directly, immediately into the system by direct connection to the storm sewers. If there's a way to delay that and therefore reduce the impact on our uses by providing less inundation that goes away faster and reduces the amount of restoration necessary. So I guess the question, long speech, but the question is where is the city on those other items that would reduce the impact of the city's project on our property? And so basically the three categories of question is how will this affect our kids? And there's a number of things there. Number two is what is the status of the city's coordinated efforts to reduce the impact on the city's project, on our property? And number three is what is the process going forward? Will we be, these are concept plans. Are we going to be suggesting alterations to the concept? When I hear you say, Dave, that area is not used currently for, that area south of Madison School is not currently used for educational programming, can we take their concept and say, look, we would like to shift more of your program to that property and away from the ones where we have uses? Is there a way to, perhaps do something deeper at Madison and reduce the impact at Bryan? Is there a way to, enter into some, and it goes back to what is our plan, because land is limited in an already built-up suburb. Is there a way to have some sort of agreement that acknowledges that changes are coming and makes things flexible in the event, whereas there can be perhaps land swaps, perhaps changes to the facilities, that maybe a certain facility would last a certain number of years, and that would give the city a certain lead time to find other solutions or to find other land or to work up things. So I guess I'd like, it's a long statement, but I'm looking for flexibility that would allow us to recognize that our situations are not static, that solving this today is not the permanent solution on a number of different issues. So that's really the questions I have.
Good, thanks. I mean, I think it's getting involved here because we were given 3 conceptual pictures with not a lot of background, so kind of opens up a can of worms. So, Margaret, do you have any comments?
First off, I want to thank the community members who came to share with us real life and put faces to what happened. So we certainly appreciate that. I also want to recognize that it is community, and in community we do work together and we talk with each other. And I think this is a great way to start a conversation. And with that said, my opening questions deal with some of the same things that were mentioned before. It talks about what effect this will have on our children, focusing on safety, some of the questions that were already mentioned, in addition to the fact, understanding that retention of water leads to insects. So we need to talk about enhanced mosquito abatement plan and all those other types of issues that come with standing water. So making sure we have a plan in place for that. The other piece that comes into place here is implementation. The one gentleman talked about this is an additive process. How do we know that what's on paper now is what's going to be implemented once everything starts being put in place? So trying to understand how can we manage that implementation, what, if any, flexibility, such as John mentioned, will we have if things are changing as they're starting this process in place? The other piece that was briefly touched on that my question revolves about, okay, what's the process for resolution? Once we get this plan in place, and down the line, as we all know, things change, landscapes change, environments change, everything changes. What type of process for resolution of issues will we have in place with the community, with the park districts, with the city? Is this another form of an intergovernmental agreement that we need to talk specifically about for these pieces? So wanting to have some of those issues outlined prior to moving forward and making a decision. Thank you.
Sure. Again, I'd like to echo what Margaret said is we're all citizens in Elmhurst. We're entrusted with the educational, both the assets and our most precious assets, the kids in this community. But we also are part of a community, and we need to work together with the city to examine this and be good partners. That said, these are concepts. I've talked to a number of aldermen. They're not plans, in my understanding. There are different options that they are considering that may and probably will change. For instance, there's a nice gravel maintenance lot over at Bryan that they could dig to China and put a 12-foot fence around if they wanted to, and give us a maintenance garage over on off of 83. There are a number of opportunities to potentially put these in other places as we talk to them. So again, they presented it to us. I understand that you've got to put a stake in the ground to start discussion, but they have not engaged us. And this is the first step of engagement, which is why we're gathering questions now, and the city would like to engage us and have that conversation, which would start next. I think, as my fellow board members have said, number one in my mind is the safety of our kids. Putting an 8-foot lake next to an early childhood center with special needs kids, we need to figure out how we address the safety issue for those kids. And I would love to figure out how to do that. The easiest thing to do would be to put subsurface storage in there. And my understanding from talking to a couple of architect engineer friends is there may be some cheaper solutions that are than those that are in this plan. Again, a discussion topic we need to have. But if you buried tanks and put a nice turf field over the top of it, both people win, but it's expensive. Second is, from a principal standpoint, safety is number one. Utility and value of the property we've been entrusted in is number two. And so we have to make sure that, I think that my colleagues have said this already, the utility of the fields for what we use them for, they're very important to different parts of the academic and the athletic and the educational experience that we have with our schools. Third, we are but one part of a more comprehensive solution. There are multiple pieces to this. Our piece, while an important piece, is only a small piece. I looked at just the southwest study area, which is the only part that really pertains to us. The first option, if I do the calculation right, only saves about 50% of the homes in that area. It does not solve 100% of the problem. So a discussion with the city around, does this solve the problem? What are the other components that need to be put in place? If it was just us and the other components did not come about, what would you get out of it? So I think that we need a number of different pieces moving forward at the same time, and we're but one piece of that, and we would like to play our role, but we want to play our role in conjunction with the other pieces. Most importantly and lastly, I'm trying to figure out how to say this right. I mean, we care about this and we need to participate in this, but the city has not told us how they're going to pay for any of this. And if I look at the solution, the option alternative 2 is $26 million to $46 million just for that piece of the entire plan. And, I think I would like to hear from the city where they're going to find the money, because, frankly, we are charged with making our kids smarter. And I would like to help the city on this, but I don't want to go down the road on something that they're going to find no money for at some point in time. I would prefer at this board table to be talking about making our kids smarter than about TIFs, than about flood detention. And I realize that it's a role, and it's not a disrespect to the folks that are out there that are suffering from this. But again, we could be willing to do all of this, but if there's no money there, we've just wasted a bunch of time going down the road. So I would like to understand what this is going to cost and where the city's going to find the money, which is probably my number one question. But again, I think that we really want to be good partners with the city and with our citizens, but I think we need to do this in a measured basis that protects the safety of our kids, the utility of our land, and and our focus on education. So.
Just quickly in response to what Chris said, it worries me if this is not our problem to figure out. It kind of worries me if we start this conversation about, well, what if they do this, or why didn't they think about this? I mean, you've seen we have, a lot of things we need to spend our time talking about. So I have questions about the specific plan they've come to us with, and I think that's what we should stay focused on, because we can't just sit here and start pitching ideas at them, and then they come here and we're like, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I think we need to stick with, and like you said, so we need to know, when are you ready to move forward with this? And you know what? I don't even think so much about how much of the plan they're going to implement, because if they're coming to us and this will help families, this will help people in our community, if this will make a difference to people who flood, then we have to sit here and consider if this will make, if we're going to do it or not. So I see what you're saying, like you want the city to come to us when they have planned money, they're moving forward, but I just, before we even get started in this discussion, I want to make sure we're not like getting off and trying to think this through for ourselves. So regarding the plan that, it's not even a plan, what is it, a concept that's in front of us? A lot of the questions I had have already been asked. Dave, and you guys can probably answer this. He said they can make the fields flood. Does that mean there's a human being flipping a switch to make it, or no, it will just automatically? No. And I'm sure it was in the engineer report, which I have to admit, I don't understand all of that.
No, the fields would have drainage underneath them. They'd have a soil sand mix heavy to the sand so that they are able to drain quickly under most, if not nearly all circumstances. They would have an elaborate underground drainage system that would empty out into the storm sewers in general. The restrictor leaving there would control that flow so that when storm rates got above a certain level, some water would be held back for a length of time. So it's not a controlled process of flooding. It's based off of the size of the restrictor on the outflow and the amount
so
of
there's
rain
not
coming
a
in.
human
No.
element to that. Okay, I knew you could answer that one.
We do have a question, though, about how often. Is it only during severe weather that they would flood, or is it designed for any rain event that the rain would run down there? That's not clear in the conceptual plan how that would work.
Okay. And kind of what Karen was asking, I had questions about if there were fences around that need to be locked by a human being. I mean, somebody said it's a benefit that in another town where they did this, kids were like on rowboats. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's not what we want. I mean, that could be a nightmare, like Chris said, about how we put fences up, who locks them, whenever this field is retaining water. Future, I mean, this is our land, so like you said, the future, if we want to make any changes to it, do we consult the city regarding the flood plan? Things like if the softball field isn't regulation size, it turns out that it's not just by human error. Do they pay to fix it? Will this construction go on in the summer? When will this construction go on? Are they in charge of taking this dirt away so that we're not just building up the field next door and creating even more flood problems, which I've heard has been a problem in the past? And a time frame, kind of like Chris said, how soon, assuming that we are on board with it after we get all our questions answered, how soon is this going to happen? Is this years down the road? Is this imminent? I keep hearing about the field in Downers Grove that was very successful, but that's just one field, and everyone keeps mentioning this one field. I want to hear other examples from Burke about where they've done this. If there has been a problem where it doesn't drain properly, it's not usable, is there some element in place so that can be fixed? Just things to cover. It's like you guys all said about how, kids first, and we're part of this community, but we just need we have a lot of questions, I think. And I think whenever we get people here to answer these questions, we're going to have more questions. Let me see. Oh, and I also have a question for the board about how we are going to get community feedback about this, because I've gotten some emails. I'm sure you guys have talked to people too, but how are we going to, engage the community in conversation to just find out what questions they have and if they're on board with this and how they feel about it? And is it just going to be at school board meetings? How are we going to, hear from the board? Hear from the community. I think that's all my questions I had.
John?
We got enough to do in the school board without reading stormwater reports, but I did try to find out a little bit more here. And I know that for the southwest area, there were some options that were in there. And I guess it was to have some pumping and storage. But I'm wondering, were there options for each of these sites? If there's things out there that they can change, are there things that they can change to reduce the impact on these sites in terms, again, because, we're holding these for the kids and for the educational purposes. Is there a way to have those changes provide a reduction in impact on our uses? Or are these just the 3 concepts that each came for these sites, or were there multiple variations for each of these sites? Just one?
No, these were the only concept plans we were given.
And these are initial concepts.
Yes.
What did they ask us to do about it? To talk about it, to tell them what doesn't work, what does work?
We said it was an informational meeting. They wanted to share the concepts with us, and at that point, we had a few questions, but we told them we needed to get back to the Board of Education and have this meeting to generate the questions to come back at them. So that was the total of the meeting that we had.
Because I'm seeing one concept for each location, and I'm just wondering. Well, I guess they're looking for us to respond as to how our uses would be impacted, and then for them to make changes to the concepts that address our concerns. Am I understanding a process like that?
Yeah, again, John, I think basically what we're trying to do is generate our concerns and our questions to the city and have the city come back and respond and start a dialogue about what's possible and not possible.
Okay.
We initially, for example, in the first, my concern was the Bryan site and the varsity softball field that's there. That is the sole girls varsity softball field for York High School. That's an important facility for us. And initially, our concern was the field didn't appear to fit, number one. Number two, how long would it be down? Because as you know, spring is a tough time to play baseball anywhere with the kind of weather we have. They're already experiencing a lot of cancellations. Is this going to add to the cancellations of varsity? So that was one of our questions. And then we went to, again, as I think Chris said, we do have a gravel pit right across the way. We said, has the city considered the gravel pit as another option for water retention? I understand the problem with that is You would have to have that much deeper, it would have to be pumped, and it would have to, now that, they may be looking at that as one of their other options, but they haven't shared that with us yet, so I can't respond.
Is there a possibility that the city might control some things that could be used to, like I said, the land swap? If they've got a site somewhere else and this really suits their needs, this is not right up against York, for example, the softball fields, where people are, the team's being bussed over from York for practice and for games. Maybe they've got a better site in mind that, that they'd be willing to exchange, and then we wouldn't be going through this process of how is our use impacted. So that's something I'd like to explore, if there are other things that they have that, could be exchanged. And then the idea is, this serves softball now, and they, even if they built a plan that served softball, it reduces our flexibility to put other things in there. And so that's why, I'm concerned. The other thing I would like to know is, just one last thing that I didn't say in the initial one, is there is some detention at Field School, and it's unusable, and it has been unusable for the whole spring. And I would like to know, what are the factors that would make this different? I'm assuming they're coming to us and they're saying it's not going to look like Field School, it's going to look like this park in Downers Grove. What are the things that are going to make it different? Yeah, there's infrastructure that you put in, but I think it also goes back to those three things that I was saying, which is frequency, duration of the inundation, and the ability to restore. Those three things will play into whether this is the example of what everybody calls dry bottom detention, or is it just, because there are many examples of promised dry bottom detention that don't actually wind up that way. And we need to make sure that if there is a dry bottom detention, it is dry enough that it's usable for the students.
Okay. Emily?
I just want to be clear, because it seems like, if you were a person who continually floods, you want to see, if you think this will help, you're going to want to see this enacted. I want to make sure we are not taking the fall as people holding this up. We are not. We, as soon as the city comes to us, we are addressing this, right? The next step is are they coming to our next meeting, our June 11th meeting? What's the next step?
That's what I would suggest. I would suggest that we generate these questions, we give them to the city ahead of time, invite them to the next board meeting, and start the dialogue and answer the questions and any others that the board may have. I think it's going to take dialogue. I can't address John's issue of whether there's land swap or anything else. And I think, as some board members said, I think everybody's busy enough here not to start designing a water retention area for the school district. I think we want to be cooperative. I'm certainly sympathetic for the residents. I drove through Jefferson in some of those flooded areas, and it was heartbreaking to see what was going on. So I think you really want to try to address this, but at the same time, this is an educational institution. It's not a storm drain city issue. So I think we need to say yes or no, here's our concerns, have them come back and respond, and then the board says, yeah, that seems to fit our needs, we're comfortable with what this concept is, or no, we still have some reservations. And I think there's some good questions that need to answer, and I think it's just the initial part of this conversation. But I think the board has come up with some pretty good questions to be answered. Who maintains? Simple things like who's going to unlock and lock a fence that surrounds the areas. Those are kind of key questions. Who cleans up after a drainage? Because, if it floods, there's going to be debris and everything else on the field. Another question is, whose responsibility is that to clean the field to get it ready for playability after a flood area like that? So, a lot of questions. And that's not to say they may very well have answers, but I think the next step is to get the city to come in and talk with the board about what those are.
Margaret?
Yeah. There was one more. I was thinking of there has been mention of a dry bottom park in Downers Grove. There is also a dry bottom park in Bensonville, which is closer, that it would be helpful if the city would take a look at and understand what the implications are for that dry bottom park and how that works and how that affects the community. And I also believe it is not on school property, but there is a school close by, a grade school close by, and trying to understand the impact of that.
Okay. Do you have one more question, comment?
I don't know if we pointed this out, but the process that we're undertaking, and we kind of stole this from the Park District. They had this idea where they were going to sit down, collect questions, hand it to the city. The city liked that idea and that approach, so we're taking the same approach as the Park District. So I just want to point out that we're kind of in sync with them on what we're doing.
I just had a few things that haven't been brought up, so I just want to get those on the record. I'm not sure if we've said this. Where has this been done next to a school? That's one of my questions, if we can see examples of that. Also, just the holistic view of this. I mean, I see slides that talk about Southwest Elmhurst, that's just this little piece, Yorkville, Pick, Washington and Seminole, Pine Street, Brimhaven, Larch Street, East End. I mean, my neighborhood floods terribly. So there's a lot of flooding in Elmhurst, and this is just a piece. And what piece of the pie is this? Like, what percentage of floodwater could this actually contain versus all of the flooding that we get? Also, you know, our fields are used. Madison may not be used, but I know for a fact Jackson is used. If we have, you know, 100, you know, almost 180 school days, that field is used on 180 days unless it's raining. So the winter months, it's a high-use area, winter months. So my question is, what happens when this ditch, for a better term, I don't know what else to call it, retention basin fills up with snow, ice, sleet, you know, the freezing and thaw cycles. So what happens then when you've got a real slick, you know, not steep, but slick slope in the winter months? So we need to look at all of the months, not just the spring. I think that's good enough for now. I think, you know, we've pretty much gone through this for about an hour, so I think we need to move on, and we've got a good list of questions, and we'll invite the city to our next meeting. Thanks. Next item is fiscal year 14 budget. We've had this on the agenda for several meetings, and I wanted to talk about what we're doing behind this agenda item. I mean, our goal was to present to the community a presentation about our budget situation. So we said several months ago we wanted to have this on the agenda as we develop our budget presentation. And that's in progress right now. The Board Improvement Committee met last week, and we're revising. It's several iterations. I mean, it's a thick deck. It's going to be, I don't know how many slides we have so far, maybe 20, 25 slides. And this is our deck where we could pull whatever community event that we're going to, you could pull slides from this master deck based on the audience and what they're interested in to explain our financial situation. And it's going to take a few more iterations to get this done. I feel like we're probably about 75% done with this community presentation. And I don't know if this item, I wanted to ask the board if we want this item still on our agenda, our Board of Education agendas. Maybe we put it back on when the Board Improvement Committee is finished with a draft of the community presentation. That was my idea. If there's any other ideas, I'll like to hear them now. But I don't know if we have to keep having to have this line item on our agenda if we don't have anything to say, unless there's other items that board members want to talk about as far as budget. Emily, go ahead.
I mean, our goal, I think, is to have this conversation with the community maybe before March. I mean, is that our time frame? So are you thinking putting it back in August, or how soon do you think you'd be coming back with it finished?
I think it will take one or two more committee meetings.
Okay. So like
not
one
very
or two
long.
more months, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
Okay, I just want to know the time frame, because then that would give us, you know, from August, September through March to have this conversation, right? Isn't that the goal? Okay, yeah.
Margaret?
The one thing I agree with, and I like your idea on, we're 70% of the way done with this. And are there other pieces that we can talk about that relate to this? And I'm thinking one piece that we might be able to talk about that relates to this is the communication plan that's associated with the getting that information out about our budget. So that's one way we can shift that focus.
Karen?
That's what I was going to say. When this topic went from finance and operations to board improvement, it wasn't just supposed to be just the deck. This is a big, comprehensive communication plan. As we talked about earlier, both throughout the year, actually, as a board and in the committees, is, this is the real issue. It's a structural budget deficit, so it impacts everything we do. And that's why we have to be very focused about, the declining dollars that come in. It's a deficit. And we have a lot of things to do. And we are a good school system, and we're on a positive trajectory, but we can't have the gap increase because of this structural budget deficit. All districts are talking about this, and it's really comprehensive. It's just not a presentation that we're going to go out to the community with. It's how does this affect everything that we do, from how we make decisions on course adds and deletes to staffing. The whole point of us having the budget discussion on agenda items is to have a healthy discussion, and I understand that there's a lot of planning up front that's required to do that. But what we wanted to do is get ahead of the game so that we didn't have to continue to reduce our staffing force. So I think that it needs to be more than just a presentation that we talk about. So I agree with Margaret on the communications plan and a comprehensive view.
John?
I agree, Margaret. Your point is excellent, and I'm just wondering if the best place to do this might be to create at least the first version of this plan would be in the board improvement committee. It seems to make sense. As I said before, I'm willing to, to do whatever's necessary. I'm not a member of that committee. If that committee members want me to keep a hand on developing the piece itself, I'll do that. If the committee wants to just take it over, that's fine too. But I think that committee should also have the responsibility, or the responsibility should be to create this plan. What's it going to look like now that we have the deck? And so, you're the chair of that committee. I'm just recommending.
Well, just the chair for tonight. But maybe it's something that we talk about at the retreat, a communication plan for this community presentation, to get the cabinet, get all of us aligned onto, what our next steps are. Would that be okay? Or is that not enough time? Time?
It depends
It's
on
always time.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a really full agenda.
Okay.
I'm not sure you're going to get into quality discussions on this.
Okay. So then maybe it just stays with, the Board Improvement Committee, which is the three officers. We can bring it to the next board meeting. Let's just talk about it at the next board meeting, and that's fine too. June 11th.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Can we just, you guys
Sure.
maybe
That
get
could
your
be an
meeting
agenda
before,
item.
then talk about it, and then we can also have this discussion at the next board meeting.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Approval of board meeting minutes. Are there any revisions or changes? Okay, seeing none, I declare them approved as presented. Board committee reports. Board Improvement Committee.
All right, I'm going to speak on behalf of the Board Improvement Committee. It's the officers. Jim is the co-chair of that committee as the board president. And what we're going to do, just so that everybody understands, when there's different committee members that are giving the committee reports, that we decided that we're going to round robin it, if you will. And you didn't get the committee notes because They haven't been put together. I put the agenda together, ran the meeting, and we've got other board members that are taking minutes and all that sort of stuff. So we realize that we're remiss on that, okay?
We just met last
I totally get
Thursday.
it. Yep, that's why, yep, just wanted to put it out there that we realize they have to be done yet, okay? So what I'm reading from is several different pieces, notes. Jim took notes and then I took notes. So what, the agenda items are not necessarily in the order on the agenda. We really talked about the financial presentation, the same thing that we just talked about. John actually presented the deck as a visitor to the committee because he owned it before, and we really talked about, you know, should it be owned by this board improvement? And so actually Jim is taking that leadership role to put the final touches to it. And we kind of talked about that plan more comprehensively, which was great because that's what we wanted to do. Okay. Secondly, I don't want to have anybody be confused about, there was an advertising policy on the agenda, and I know that we have the policy committee, but the thought was is that we weren't looking at the specific policy, but once again, it's been brought up to the board and Mr. Pruneau about interest in advertising. So what are we going to do about that? So we really talked more bigger picture about some of the guidelines and expectations around an advertising policy. Because I think that there's somewhat maybe a misperception that there's a lot of dollars that we're not tapping into, and some of the facts say that it's not that much, and there's a lot of maintenance around it. So it's just kind of a little bit, I'll call it a research, Dave, and correct me if that's the wrong term, but there's just a little bit of work to be done. And what we're trying to balance is how much work do you do, right, outside of, once again, education, but also to kind of vet something that has been brought to us as a potential revenue source, if you will. So I'll say that, okay? The Harris poll questions, just so that you know from the board standpoint, we wanted to, practice this continuous improvement, and we wanted to improve our results. So what we're doing is twofold. One is going to teachers and staff and 2 parents. So really what we talked about is Shannon and John went to the DLT meeting, which is the district leadership team, which consists of representatives from every one of our buildings, and presented the questions that the Board Improvement Committee put together based on the survey results. And we, Shannon and John, got feedback from the members of the DLT team to kind of maybe massage the questions just a little bit, it sounds like. So we're very thankful of that. They were appreciative that we really wanted to improve and get better. And so that's where we are. There was some talk about, can we not only have focus groups, these questions will be part of a focus group to kind of get to the root cause of the issues of the results of the survey. Can we go to the ETC, which is the Elmhurst Teachers Council? Would they, can we get some feedback from them, go out to the different buildings, the staff at the buildings, throughout our school liaison program, and what we'd want to do is orchestrate that through these same questions and make sure that as we get the feedback that they're coalesced and we try to work through the root causes. Okay. Meet the board. We as a board 2 years ago said that the community wanted to hear more from us and connect with us, and we wanted to do that as well. So we instituted a Meet the Board in June, and what we had said is that our June meeting, prior to the public board meeting, that we would open up and be available for any community members to meet us, and it's an open dialogue. They can talk to us about anything. There is a recommendation from the Board Improvement Committee that we delay the Meet the Board from June to August for a couple reasons. One is we really wanted to focus on getting more people coming to those meetings and reaching out, and June 11th is around the corner. And the other thought is that, as we are putting together this budget presentation to the community, maybe what we do is talk about that and have some segments of that deck, if you will, for that Meet the Board. So I guess at this point, before I move on, I'm just going to say that's our recommendation. Do we agree with that as a full board? Do we have consensus to move the Meet the Board meeting from June to August, and then we communicate early that we're having that? What do you think, non-Board Improvement Committee members? Agree? Anybody disagree? Any? Okay. All right. So then we moved on to retreat planning, and typically the way that we've looked at retreats is the Board Improvement Committee worked on the board retreat, and then the Performance Management Committee worked on the board and cabinet retreat. Based on the time frame that our retreats are coming up soon, and we didn't have a Performance Management Committee meeting, we talked about it as the Board Improvement Committee. So what we had talked about is the June 13th retreat would be with the cabinet and the board. And some of the things that Mr. Pernod had indicated that they wanted to present to us as a board is, you know, there's a lot of mandates coming down, right, with Park and Common Core and PARA and NCLB. And we really they wanted to present to us what's the impact to the district, to the organization. I think that was it for that meeting. I know that the board really wanted to look at, you know, the DPIs and the achievement gaps and the plans to reduce those achievement gaps, and I think that might be covered too.
We did talk about that.
Yep, okay. I'm just reading from the notes, sorry, Dave. And then lastly is the June 19th retreat, which is the board retreat, and we talked about strategic planning, because this board really wants to do strategic planning and continue that path and really look at, you know, what do we continue to do, you know, prioritizing 2 or 3 items that we really focus on, and then how does everything else relate and fall into those items, and setting our board goals for next year. And really, once again, as we've done in the past, is we have, you know, 2 new board members. We want to make sure that and Jim was just on the campaign trail, and what new things have we heard, and how does that come into the board, and what our plans are. I think that was it. We also talked about reviewing board norms, because we have new board members. Right? I think
That's all? Okay, next committee, Finance and Operations. Oh, did you have a question? I should have asked. Any discussion?
Can I just ask one question? I didn't catch. So the cabinet retreat, mandates, DPIs in progress, what were the items?
mandates, Park, Common Core, PARA, NCLB, KPIs, and plans, district plans. And Dave, correct me if I have this wrong, because I'm just looking at notes.
Because I just want to make sure that we carve out some time to talk strategically in that meeting. I mean, mandates are a fact of life. We have to deal with those. I get it, and we should understand what our constraints are. But by the same token, I think we would be remiss if we just talked about the reasons why we can't do things. I think we want to make sure that we can talk about progressing. We still haven't. We were going to collect some data. We were going to pinpoint some DPIs. We're going to talk about where we're going to stretch to those. So I'm just curious about how, I get the mandates thing, but how does that fit within the overall discussion about the goals for the coming year?
Because, Chris, a lot of the things that are coming down are going to affect the decision-making that this board's going to have about the direction of the district in the long term. And I think we need a dialogue with the board about what those are. I don't want to use it as an excuse, so that is not the intention of what this discussion is. We certainly want to move the district forward, but there are significant things on the horizon the board just needs to be aware of, and it's an awareness session to say, here are some things that are going to impede or have an effect on where we can go with this district in the short and long term. So I don't want this at all portrayed as this is our excuse to get off the hook and we're not going to do anything. That is not the intention at all. But I think there's an obligation for the public and the board to understand that more and more you are limited in what you can do in a school district and what our obligations are and what direction you can choose to take this district or not. I mean, we just heard this evening about mandates and how they're affecting our district. That is a reality, however. So unless the board gives me permission to not follow mandates from the state of Illinois, I, as the superintendent, have an obligation to follow those mandates. And so that's the dialogue. The dialogue is to say, here are the things that are coming. Here's how they may affect where we want to go. What do we do now? What is the long-term, short-term plan? Because it takes resources, it takes time, it takes all those things. So that's the discussion. And, it's a dialogue just to, and I'll use Park in that as it has technology implications, it has budget implications, it has DPI implications, it has college readiness implications. I think the board just needs to know what those are.
And agreed. And yeah, my question wasn't whether, this or that. Right. It was just that, can we make sure that we have a section of the time carved out for stuff other than that, or the extension of that? What you're saying is this impacts the box that we have to play in, but how do we, what are our goals for the coming year, given the mandates, given where we're going? It sounds like we're gonna get into that, but I just want to make sure that we take a little bit of our time and at least talk strategically. We do have to deal with the mandates.
I think this whole discussion is strategic.
Okay.
I really do. I think any organization wants to know what its limits are, what are the things it has to do, what options do you have, and to me, that's part of the strategic planning that I'm familiar with. So I think that's the whole purpose of this meeting, is to say, given these parameters, where can the district go and where do we want to invest our time and efforts in the short and long term to accomplish as much as we can in this short period of time, given some of the challenges we're going to be facing. And that's the discussion.
And I know that going into this meeting, we had asked the board, for input. And some of the things that we discussed, to your point, Chris, is yes, these are mandated, but what's the purpose and intention of the mandates? What are the expected outcomes, right? And how do we ensure that, Dave, to your point, the DPIs that we have in place, are they measuring to get the expected outcomes and to ensure that we're implementing intentionally, purposefully, right? For increasing achievement and, increasing employee professional development and whatever else it happens to be.
And, within constraints and whatnot, I also want to talk about opportunities. And where would we do that in our retreat then? I would love to understand, what other districts are doing that's innovative. What are some things that are happening out there that are pulling education forward and that we may not be doing? We may not be able to do them today. They may be something we put on our radar screen, given budget, given what else. But I think challenging ourselves to look outside our doors to see what others are doing. And so rather than saying we have these mandates, constraints, or rather than getting stuck, and I'm saying this wrong, rather than getting stuck and saying that I can only do this because the box is only this big, what are some creative solutions that are out there? And maybe that's a board discussion, because the administration has a lot of stuff going on right now, and we should be the ones that are outward facing or not. Are we going to have that discussion at some point?
You asked me to go through a restructuring plan. So that's what we're doing. So I'm a little confused right now as to what the intention of the board wants, because I was given a parameter that central office was going to come up with a restructuring plan, given the financial realities, but also looking forward to the future. That's what we're doing. And now I'm hearing maybe that's not what we want to do. So I need some direction from the board about where we're going with this, because I'm not sure, Chris, what you're asking for, quite frankly. I was given a parameter 2 months ago, 3 months ago, to come up with options for the school district that the board wanted to see. We are in the process of doing that, plan on doing that at retreat, and I'm hearing, well, maybe that's not what we want. So no, I'm just asking.
What I heard was that we were going to talk about mandates and constraints, and within those limits, how that impacts our strategy and our ability to move forward. I did not hear about the other piece. That is what we asked for. So if that's what we're going to talk about, then I'm fine with what that
Chris,
was.
at the same time, I want a little dose of reality here, though. I'm not going to go blue sky and talk about all of these other options without you knowing what the other limits are. That's all I'm saying. I think you have to look at both sides of the coin.
Absolutely.
If
I
you're
just didn't hear
responsible-
that piece when she was talking about what was on the agenda.
I didn't bring my notes from the meeting, so.
Okay, we're on the same page. I just didn't hear you say that, so that's why I was asking the question.
Okay, so for the retreat, we're talking about mandates, DPIs that will get into transformational changes. It's going to change our district. So yeah, we will get there. And then the path that we asked you to go on was to create a sustainable model for our school district. So that's ongoing. That's not, we're not going to be talking about that at the retreat, right? Right.
It's up to the Board of Education.
No, I mean, he's not ready. So I just want to clear.
Right, but the point is that we were going to talk about that balance between the financial reality we have and the desire to become a lighthouse district and how we can create something that balances those. And I think Dave was talking about a couple of flavors. There was kind of, if you don't have any more money, here's about what all you can do. And if you had more money, here's what it would look like, with the reality check of the box that the state puts us in, and that there's not an unlimited pocketbook. And I think that's where we're going. I just want to make sure that it's not one of these things that is designed to fit into a financial box because of that. That we challenge ourselves to look at how do we innovate, or how do we change? We've been doing education the same way for 60 years. How do we integrate some of the new stuff that's out there, recognizing the financial? Maybe there's some things we need to stop doing. Maybe there's some things we need to start doing more of. That was my understanding of what the mandate was to Dave and his team. Just wanted to clarify.
John?
I think I hear Dave saying is that our strategic choices are extremely limited because of all the legal requirements that have to be met and keep increasing. So I think you're kind of both saying the same thing.
And I'm not even sure if it's a restriction. I think it's just the board, I think, has an obligation to know what those parameters are that you're going to be operating under. That's all I'm saying. And it does have an effect on where you can go in a district. Even if we have innovative ideas, there are going to be limits on what you can do. You know, one of the things, there's this concept of cut your way to excellence. I don't think you can cut your way to excellence. I'm sorry. As lean as we are right now, I think there's tough choices you're going to have to make in the future to stay where you are. And then if you want big picture items, which we want to talk about, there are those realities, though. The other thing I think is important is, as much as we talk about these things, how do we engage the community again in some of these concepts? Because, I was given the task by the board to come up with these ideas. They're my ideas, the cabinet's ideas, but we haven't gone to staff, we haven't vetted these, we haven't gone out there. And I think the next step, and we need to talk about that at June 13th, how do we engage the community in some of this dialogue with some of this stuff? Because it's a community issue. It's starting with our faculty and staff, who I'm sure has great ideas, and I'm viewing this as just a starting point with this dialogue. But again, within the parameters that were given from the state, from the feds, from everything else, because those things are going to impede resources, they're going to impede time, and given those circumstances, what can we accomplish? That's the discussion that I hope we can have.
Did you have something?
One of the things that was brought up was the regulations that the state is, and the state and the federal government are the parameters that we have to work in. And one of the things that I heard you say, Dave, that I thought was interesting is trying to understand. One, we need to understand absolutely what those regulations are, and the other thing, I think we need to make conscious decisions on how. And I hasten to say this, but I say, and if, or perhaps when, we can actually implement those regulations. in making conscious decisions and understanding the impact that if we make different choices, what that might mean to us. So I think that would be a perfect discussion, which I think definitely leads into the strategic and transformational thinking process that we are all trying to get to.
But I think Dave's right. What he said is until he hears otherwise from us, he obviously does, you know. So I appreciate that. And especially for us new people, I know you also are going to frame things, you know, we need to know exactly where we stand with the mandates and all that. So I know you're doing a lot of that for our benefit, and I appreciate it.
Well, and the other thing, as Margaret said, some of the timelines, you don't have a choice. I mean, some of the timelines are coming and it's mandated. So you need to know that too. When, you know, right now, here's the plan, this is what's going to happen. You know, how does that affect long-term versus short-term? And do you have choices?
So I have a question. Can we get information before this June 13th retreat?
We're
so that
planning, yes.
Okay,
The
thank you.
cabinet is
Okay.
planning, putting together
Okay.
all of this information right now. So we'll have that before the retreat. So that's what we're working on right now.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to Finance and Operations Committee.
All right, in the interest of time, you guys can all read the notes, right? If you have any questions, you can ask me. I will highlight one section of this, which was the IMRF unfunded actuarial accrued liability, which is the only thing that which only Chris Welton and I can actually enjoy knowing about. But the point there is that the IMRF is the retirement fund that for our non-teacher or anybody but our teachers or what we call Chris, how would you say that? Non-certified plan. It is a different plan than TRS in that we pay into it, and there is an actuarial liability that's measured, and to the extent that we're underfunded, they send us a bill and loan us the money to bridge that gap. That, I think last year we were looking at it, and in our unfunded liability, for which we pay 7.5% interest on, to the fund was over $8 million. And it started to get scary because it was growing very fast. And we had asked Chris that when we got our report from the IMRF this year, let's take a look at that and let's see what's happening, because there are a couple options. I mean, we could contribute more to it to reduce that liability. That is our liability. We could elect to continue to just pay the 7.5% on the unfunded amount and do nothing. And I think the good news is that the current fiscal year unfunded liability, and I hit the wrong button, has stabilized and actually improved. So last year, so in 2010 it was $8 million. In 2011 it was $8,700,000. And now this year it's back to $8 million again. So it has turned the curve. Our funded percentage has gone up to 75.92, our funded ratio. It had gotten down to 72.5, and it was continuing to decline over the last 3 or 4 years. It was something we had asked Chris to look at. I think at this point in time, in looking at this, I just wanted to make the board aware that, I think the recommendation is to keep an eye on it now that it's not getting any worse and it's improving. And the way this improves is that we fund it, and then also the investments in that pool continue to perform well, and it closes that gap. But at some point in time, if that didn't continue to happen, we should have a discussion about whether we should be closing that gap through contributions that we make. We could theoretically borrow money at 2.5% or 3% and put it into the fund and save ourselves a 7.5% interest cost. But the point is if our investments in that fund continue to generate returns, maybe we wouldn't have had to do that. The other piece of that is, as we just heard earlier, we don't have any money. So beyond that minor detail, we would have to go borrow the money to do it. And do you want to lever up the district to do that when the state is and the fund is actually lending you the money to do it? There's a slight cost of 7.5% versus 2 or 3%. So again, very long way of making you guys aware that there's an $8 million unfunded liability on our balance sheet for the IMRF fund, that it was getting worse, but it's stabilized and now it's getting better, and we're going to keep an eye on it. If anybody feels differently, please feel free to insert your comments. And I think that was the only material piece of our meeting that I wanted to bring up, unless you guys have any questions.
Any discussion? John?
Chris, is there some recourse that happens in this if it's not paid? I mean, is there some deadline where there's something that bad happens? Or is it just the interest accruing at what percent?
Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, what this is the present value of the future stream of liabilities that we have out there to our employees. So this $8 million is paid over some period of, I don't know, 30 years or so is estimated as people age, retire, collect retirement. So it's not an $8 million lump sum. Someday, bang, somebody says you owe us $8 million. I mean, this would be worked off over time. And I think what they do is we receive a bill every year for our participants. And so what generated this too is that their assessment to us is climbing. I don't know, what was it last year? It was 11?
It was 12.25, and for 2014, it's to go down to 11.8, I believe.
Okay. So they send us a bill. So they're not going to show up and ask for $8 million at one point in time. I think it would impact, and the impact would be spread out over time.
Yes, I think, John, the employer contribution would increase if this unfunded liability grew. That 12.25 or 11.8 would go up, and that would help to fund the unfunded liability.
Okay. Next is the superintendent's agenda, the consent agenda. Are there any items that you would like pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? John?
I move that the board approve the superintendent's consent agenda items A through L as proposed.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Okay, we need a roll call.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mrs. Bastido?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Collins is absent. Mrs. Ebner?
Yes. That's 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. The motion carries. Next is the Oh. Okay. Would anyone like to do the thank you for donations? There are many on there. Okay, I'll go ahead and do it, unless somebody wants to. I mean, we have several donations here, a lot from the PTA. I'm not going to go through them because of the time, but we have donations for Jefferson, Jackson, York, and Field, and we are thankful for all of them. Okay, superintendent's agenda action items. Approval of resolution ascertaining prevailing wages. Is there any discussion?
This is required, so this is an annual resolution that we have to pass by the Board of Education. I don't know if the board has any questions, but this is pretty normal.
John?
We're basically making a finding about the prevailing wage in our community, which guides the labor component of our construction contracts. Isn't that right, Chris?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I need a motion to approve this, right? Or do I just do a roll call?
It's a resolution, so it's a roll call vote.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Any further discussion? Motion first.
Okay, I need a motion for this item. Thanks.
I move that the Board of Education approve the prevailing wage resolution as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
Discussion. Discussion.
Is there any discussion? I know. Okay, roll call.
Mr. McDonough? Mrs. Bastido?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Collins is absent. Mrs. Ebner?
Yes, it's 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. Upcoming meetings. There are a lot of meetings in June. June 4th, performance management. June 5th, curriculum and instruction. June 11th, our regular Board of Education meeting. June 13th is our first retreat. That will be with the cabinet. And June 18th, finance and operations. June 19th is our second retreat. And June 25th, policy meeting.
Question from the Board of Education. We don't have a time determined for the June 13th retreat. Is the board, we started at 6 o'clock last year, so I don't know if that's still acceptable to the board or not. I think we went like from 6 until 10. Obviously not
Could we
enough.
start at 9:30?
Is 6 o'clock okay with board members?
Yeah.
For that day? Then we'll post it at 6.
June 19th that's the-
Same thing. 6 o'clock?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we handled the action on closed session item. Any board communications? John, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, it does say SACID, and I just wanted to say that I went to the SACID board meeting. It was an organizational meeting in which I voted for officers who I just met in a few minutes beforehand, but never one to rock the boat. No, I met the SACID, members of the SACID organization. They're a really devoted, dedicated group, and very knowledgeable in this area. And SACID is a resource that we should continue to take advantage of to the extent it fits our strategic needs.
Anything else? Okay. I declare the meeting adjourned, 10 o'clock.